We're a country in crisis. That's why about a week ago I wrote the Prime Minister offering to fast-track policies for an affordable, safe, self-reliant Canada. I've not heard back, so I'm seeking an urgent meeting with the Prime Minister to discuss how Parliament can quickly reverse the food price crisis, the crime crisis, and the dependency crisis Liberals have caused. I'll bring practical solutions and an openness to hear other ideas and work together to fast-track results.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre there is saying he's seeking an urgent meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney to discuss affordability, crime, and other issues, as he highlighted. The Prime Minister's office has just sent us a note saying that the Prime Minister is looking forward to meeting with opposition party leaders to discuss their priorities as this new sitting progresses. All of that comes as MPs unanimously approve a Conservative motion to fast-track a Liberal bill through the House by Wednesday. That legislation, Bill C-19, seeks to enact what's called the new Canada and Groceries and Essentials benefit, which would increase the existing GST rebate. It's a plan the Parliamentary Budget Officer said today will cost Ottawa an estimated $12.4 billion over 5 years. The leader of that party, the Conservatives, Mr. Poilievre, has called it a Band-Aid solution, but as you heard there, his party will now kind of usher it through the House of Commons at an expedited pace. Here's Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne on the new spirit of collaboration.
I'd like to believe it, but maybe I've been here too long to know that folks say things, but what matters to Canadians is the action they're going to take. On my side, I can tell you, in caucus, no, I'm willing, and I'm saying that on live television, I'm willing to appear at committee this afternoon if they so want.
Here to unpack the new year, new vibes is our front bench. Former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant is with us. He's now the CEO of Space Canada. Former Conservative Deputy Leader Lisa Raitt is here. She's the Vice Chair and Managing Director of Global Investment Banking at CIBC. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is with us, as is the Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Rob Benzie. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Vashti.
Good to see you. Lisa, I'll start with you on this one. Very interesting. We're hearing that meeting is going to take place this week. It was just confirmed by both the Prime Minister's office and by Mr. Poilievre. What do you make of this, not just talk of collaboration, but distinct effort to actually make that materialize on the Conservatives' part?
I think that one thing I know to be true is that when Canadians are in a crisis, and I think we are in an affordability crisis, I think that's very concerning, what they want to see from their elected officials is cooperation. We saw that during COVID. They very much appreciate it when different orders of government work with one another. And I dare say that the same would apply with respect to opposition and government, especially in this case, where it's about giving relief to Canadians who probably need a break in terms of how much of their groceries and their gas and everything else is costing. Now, the Conservatives are still going to tie it back and say, look, we're in this problem because of the way that you guys have managed the economy for the last 10 years. But they're not going to stand in the way of policies that are going to help alleviate some of the pressure. So it's a little bit different from the past. They're still going to try to ascribe some kind of blame, but at the same time, they're not going to stand in the way and be an obstacle or be claimed to be an obstacle for an actual relief.
So it's interesting because we'll talk about sort of the speech, Tom, from Mr. Poilievre earlier. But as I put to Mr. Outhouse, I left that speech with the impression that there was a real doubling down on the approach taken in the last election. The video today, the meeting, the efforts in the House of Commons leave me with actually a bit of a different impression, which is that this is everyone hates the word pivot, but this is a pivot from, in a certain way by Mr. Poilievre. This effort to be more collaborative, borne out by actual actions, is not the same as what we would have seen necessarily 6 months ago.
Exactly, but I also think that it's a question of context. Mr. Poilievre wasn't going to change his tune or his tone when talking to the people who were about to decide his fate as leader of the party. He was going to be himself, and he assumed that wholly in that speech. He says, people want us to change. We're not going to change. We're right. And they eventually always realize that we're always right. So that was for his home base. Now he's trying to do what everybody understands that he's got to do if he ever wants to have a chance of becoming Prime Minister of Canada. He's got to talk to more people, not just his hardcore base. So I loved your interview with Mr. Outhouse. I had a chance to see most of it before, and I really, first of all, I found him very refreshing. super articulate, very engaged and engaging. And I thought that his messages were super clear. So if that's the way that they're going to go, use the rule book of the House of Commons to best effect, try to get stuff brought forward, even though it's going to be a little bit like the NDP. Well, they didn't get much credit for the dental plan, the Liberals did, but people kind of remember it was the NDP. So, you know, he's bringing forward the checks a little bit faster, which means that they don't necessarily coincide with perhaps an earlier election. Maybe they'll have to promise a second check if they get reelected. But at the same time, I think that what Poilievre is showing is that he's on the right track. He's talking to people. He talks about affordability all the time. It was a great move on the part of the Conservatives, and I think it has to be acknowledged as such.
So what about Brian, your anticipation as to how, or the stakes for the Liberals navigating that? Because to, Minister Champagne's point, they're not necessarily accustomed to it. At the same time, this has to have a little bit of strategizing around a possible election. I don't think the Conservatives want to be seen as forcing one. I think the Liberals, don't want to be seen that way, but might be pushed into that kind of position as well. What is your take on how the government has to navigate this newfound promise of collaboration?
Let me start off by saying I agree with Tom's analysis, but I want to add one little difference, which goes a little bit to your question. I think for Poilievre, what this does is provide a pretty strong talking point where, to your point, Vashi, he looking to do a bit of a pivot. He can, in the future, say, look, I've helped you on some things that we agreed on. We fast-tracked this. It's going to be something that he can use, I believe, to sort of soften his image. And what Outhouse was saying, basically try to show a little bit maybe who he is more, or or what people want him to be more of, to try to be a little more appealing to a larger group in some certain ridings and key areas. So to me, it's not so much about taking credit about the substance of the GST initiative. It's more about that talking point. And then at the same time, I think for the Liberals, this is interesting because it's a bit almost on defense for them too. It's a bit of a talking point for them too. Look, we discussed last week. I mean, there's substantive reasons why this policy will help a lot of people, to Lisa's point, on the issues facing people with affordability. But at the same time, from a purely political point of view, this allows the Liberals to say, look, we're focused on the economy, we're focused on trade, we're focused on the trading relationship with the U.S. and others and all that good stuff. But also, we did do some stuff on affordability, such as, and so it's a really interesting file or issue, if you will, because it's sort of serving as a talking point, almost on defense for both. And yeah, to your point, I think the Liberals of the last 10 years will find it very weird to try to collaborate. They're going to find that, I think, probably very different from what they've been used to. But I'm not sure for Prime Minister Carney. Look, he came out right after the election, said we'll call a by-election right away if there's one, and Poilievre wants to run in it. So I think he certainly, whether that's in his DNA or his approach, he certainly wants to not try to get into that stuff. So I think he'll be able to handle it and handle it quite well.
Well, I think even from maybe even a more pragmatic perspective, whereas in the last 10 years, the natural dancing partner, Benzie, was the NDP because there was so much policy alignment between the two parties. That policy alignment, in many cases, now exists much more so with the Conservatives than it does with any other party.
And that's a great point, Vashi, and that's certainly true. I mean, it's Stephen Harper week on Parliament Hill this week. They're going to hang the portrait of the former prime minister, and we know that from the reporting from my colleague Tana McCharles that Mr. Harper and Mark Carney speak quite often. And we know that Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Carney, or Mr. Harper, speak quite often. Remember, Mr. Harper wanted Mr. Carney to be his finance minister after he had made him Bank of Canada governor way back when. So we're in an interesting time where Mark Carney really does appeal to progressive conservatives, what I would call progressive conservatives, red Tories. Not that Mr. Harper's necessarily a red Tory, but certainly here in Ontario, Premier Doug Ford is, and Doug Ford is the closest thing that Mark Carney has to a bromance partner among the premiers. So I think Carney is more comfortable in that space. And plus, there's only 7 NDP MPs right now. So it's not like I mean, I guess they get you over the top in a majority, but do you want to have those 7 MPs being the tail that wags a dog, or do you want a lot of moderate conservative MPs from Ontario, from the West, from Quebec? I mean, that's a really attractive coalition for Mr. Carney. It's not a real coalition, but it's certainly one that can survive. And one other thing, Vashi, that I took out of your interview with Steve Outhouse, who exudes reasonableness, frankly. I think that it sounds to me like the Tories do not want an election. Steve said to you, look, it hasn't even been a year yet. And I think he's right. I don't think Canadians necessarily want an election. I think Mark Carney might want an election because the polls are looking good for him. But it's always risky to go to the polls. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I was talking to some Liberal MPs this weekend who were saying that they have more of a concern now than they would have a few months ago, Lisa, about being punished by the voters on that. Do you think this promise or this spirit of collaboration, A, lasts, and B, do you think could it stave off an election?
Wow. Can it last? Yes. Because I think as much as it would be nice to get to an election sooner than later, I think the reality is that what Benji said, the Canadian public do not want to have an election. And I actually think it was good policy or good practice that this idea was floated earlier on so that you could take a litmus test as to how Canadians feel about it. And it wasn't good. There's just not an appetite for that right now. They want people to work. So the Conservatives are going to work. So when the Conservatives or the NDP or whoever find themselves having to support the government on some kind of legislation in the spring, at least they started a track record in terms of cooperation.